self-audit. I want to ask those who are present today, how did you know about this program? Please unmute yourself and let us know.
My mom told me.
Who is speaking?
Moshe.
Yes, Moshe?
My mom told me about it.
Your mom told you about it, okay. Paula, how did you hear about this meeting?
I saw a post on social media.
Which social media? Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram?
I think it was LinkedIn.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Nice to,
yesterday actually.
Okay, nice to have you. Tracy, where did you hear about us from, about this meeting?
I saw a post on Facebook. Yes.
Okay, you're very welcome. Jason Lamar, I know you. Okay, were you saying something else?
No.
Okay, Jason, I know you want to say something, but your microphone is not showing. So please check your settings, make sure your microphone is showing and your video is on as well. So let's go straight into it. The other people will join us as we go along. I hope you can all see my screen and you can see me as well.
Yes.
Okay, so one thing I'd like you to know, as the meeting is going on, if you may be seeing a lot of people's videos, but if you want to see the person who is speaking, there's a function called speaker view. So you press that one and the speaker will become bigger on your screen, so the other people will not distract you. So the first thing that I want us to talk about before we talk about the expectations that you have for this meeting is a concept that is called the time value of money. Does anyone know about this? Has anyone ever heard about it? Do you want to tell us what you've heard about it? Does silence mean nobody? Moshe, have you heard about it before?
Not really.
You haven't heard about it. Okay, for people who are into finance, people who do finance, there's a belief that the value of money, there is a belief that, and which is true, that the value of money increases over time. And the value of money today is not the same value as it is, it's going to be next month or even a year from now. I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, and that was very many years ago, a bottle of soda was 250 shillings. If I gave you 250 shillings today, would you be able to get a soda, 250 mils? The answer is no. The mini soda is now 1,000 shillings. So over this time, the price of that small soda has gone up 4 times. It's exactly the same. If I give you money today, let's say I give you 20 million today to buy a car, and you're like, you know what, let me keep this money safe, and 5 years from now, I'm going to use the same money to buy the car that I wanted. You will be surprised that you won't be able to afford a car that costs 20 million shillings today, because the value increases over time. And therefore your money that you have today is going to be of no value or of much less value in future. When you look at it in terms of time, just think about a concept we call person time. When you're going for a meeting, and this is why I've said many people have registered, but we are starting early. If you're going for a meeting, let's say, or you're going to meet your friends, or you're going for a meeting, and they tell you that the meeting starts at 9 o'clock, and you arrive at 10 minutes past 9, how many minutes late are you? Who can guess? How many minutes have been lost, or how much time has been lost? Paula, you want to guess?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. What about Pamela? What do you think? How much time has been lost? How many?
I think you've lost the whole meeting.
He says you've lost the whole meeting. Okay, Emmanuel, what do you think? How much time has been lost? A meeting starts at 9, you're 10 minutes, and the person is 10 minutes late. How many minutes have been lost? John Manuel, Emmanuel? As we wait for him, Tracy, how much time has been lost?
About 20, because you have to settle in and understand what the meeting is about, what's going on.
Okay, Tracy says about 20 minutes, and you bring in a very important concept. When you're late for a meeting, you have to settle down first. Jason, unfortunately, I can't hear you. Can you hear us, Jason? Okay, I'll surprise you. If you're 10 minutes late for a meeting, you have wasted, and let's say there are 6 people going to be there at that meeting, you actually have lost 60 minutes. You wasted 60 minutes. You know why? Because many times people wait for others to come for the meeting. You've been at meetings where they keep saying, oh, let's give 5 minutes for other people to come in. But the thing is, the other people who are waiting are actually doing nothing while they're waiting for the other people, for you to come for that meeting. So each of those people has actually lost 10 minutes of their time. So I've lost 10 minutes, the other person has lost 10, 10, 10. And when you add it all together, a whole hour has actually been lost, because each of these people could have been doing something that is really important in those 10 minutes. Does that make sense? So we need to always think about time in that aspect. And Tracy brought in the aspect of settling down. So you're 10 minutes late, you're going to settle down, you're going to waste more, maybe 5 minutes of your time and of everybody else's time. So that is the time, that is the value of time. We should never underlook that. The other thing is the value of time for yourself. The time you have now is the only time you're sure of. I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but none of us knows what is going to happen to us at the end of this day. We don't know 1 hour from now what is going to happen to us. Will we still be here? Will we be able to do the things we want to do? So when you're planning your life, you need to take advantage of now. What are the things that you can do now to contribute to what you want to become in future? So those are some things that I want us to always remember. Think about the time of the person that you are supposed to meet or spend time with, but also think about the value of time for yourself, the value of now, in keeping in mind what you want to do in future. If there are any questions, please put up your hand or unmute and interrupt me and ask your question. So before we go to the next slide, I want to ask you, what are your expectations? When you signed up for the meeting, what were your expectations? Feel free to unmute yourself and tell us, what are your expectations? Emmanuel? Emmanuel? Okay, Moshe, what were your expectations when you joined up for this meeting? Unmute yourself, yes?
I expected to learn a lot.
Learn a lot about what?
About things I didn't know.
Okay, that's interesting. Tracy, what about you? Tracy, unmute yourself. Don't forget to unmute yourself when you're speaking. Yes, Tracy?
For a self-audit, I never considered one. So I want to know more, what can I do? Like, what assessments should I consider when doing a self-audit?
Okay, thank you, Tracy. So Tracy is really interested in the self-audit component. Doreen, what is your expectation? Doreen, unfortunately, you're like Jason, your speaker, your microphone function is not on. So please check your settings. Pamela, expectations that you want to share?
Yeah, mine is also on self-audit. Like, where do you start? And I'd like to know exactly, just to point out those areas of my life that, and start the audit.
Okay, great. So it's good to know we have 2 people who are really interested in the self-audit component. If they were the only 2 people present, we'll just skip to that part of the meeting. Okay, so let's move on. So the next slide, which I believe you can see, what you see here is the human brain. So the human brain has two sides, the left lobe and the right lobe, and it's exactly identical. They are like mirror images of each other. So what I'm showing you is a section through the brain. It's being cut right through the middle, front to back. And there's something important that I want to talk about this brain. So the 2 areas I have highlighted are one is called the frontal cortex, or we can call it the pre-frontal cortex, which is the area that is circled red. You see how much of the brain it takes? It's almost most of the brain. And then the second one is called the amygdala, which is this tiny little thing over there. And the amygdala is named after acorn. So amygdala is not acorn, almond is the word for almond in Greek. And if you look at this picture where my pointer is, that is an almond, and comparing it to the size of a capsule. Many of us have taken medicine. So that is the size of the almond compared to a capsule. And so that's the size of your amygdala is as small as a tablet that you, and a capsule that you would take if you are feeling unwell. Now, these two parts of the brain are the parts of the brain that control the way we as human beings react to external stimulus. When there's a stimulus from outside, someone says something to us, or we hear about something, or we see something, those are the parts of the brain that determine how we are going to react. Now, for those who have not heard about this concept, this is going to be a little bit of news. So this part of the brain called the frontal cortex is the one that as a human being, you want to be functioning all the time. But newsflash, this part of the brain is not mature until your mid to late 20s. It starts undergoing development when you're born, and then when you reach about the age of 11 years, rapid changes begin to happen in it. And it continues non-stop until your mid-20s, and for some people up to their late 20s. What does it mean? The frontal cortex, as you can see, is concerned with planning, thinking about consequences of your actions. It is concerned with solving problems. When a problem comes to you, how do you solve it? A math problem, a life problem. And then it's also concerned with controlling your impulses. If someone says something to you, how do you respond? Are you going to fight immediately? When you see a car on the road, are you going to run away immediately, or are you going to judge how far the car is going to decide whether you can cross or have to go backwards? So when all that is happening, it is the frontal cortex that is supposed to do that. Now, unfortunately for young people, from the age of 11, like I said, to your mid-20s or even late 20s, this part of your brain is not yet doing those functions to capacity. It is still developing. Now, so what is controlling a young person's mind? The young person's mind is being controlled by the almond, the amygdala. It controls your emotions, and that is why you see a lot of young people are moody. Very often they swing between being moody and excited. Someone can come from yeah at a party, and the next minute she's crying, or he's crying, or he's sad, doesn't want to talk to anyone. It's because of that little almond in your brain. It controls our impulses. You've noticed how young people very easily get into a fight. How did you say that about me? How do you call my mom that? You know, how can you say that? And they jump into a fight. Aggression, instinctive behavior. So, in other words, the mind of a young person is exactly like the mind of an animal. This part of the brain is actually called the primitive brain. Its function is for one, to help an animal move out of its parent's care to establish itself. In other words, it should be ready to take risks, to start a family. You've seen how young people are always having crushes on different people, getting into relationships. It's because that part of your brain is actually what is pushing you to get there. So it's an animal instinct. You're trying to establish yourself, to start a family. You're ready to fight off enemies, and that is the aggressiveness. Impulses, you're ready to run away when you think there's danger, or you're very quickly, or you freeze. You know, you either run, freeze, or get into a fight. So that is what is happening in the brain of a young person. The control is being done by the amygdala. Now, so the question is then, what exactly is happening in the prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that you really need to help you make rational decisions, think about consequences, plan your life? There's a concept that is called use it or lose it. I don't know if some of you have heard about it. Has anyone heard about that concept? Use it or lose it, concerning the brain. Anyone? Unmute yourself if you have. Okay, the silence makes me assume no one has heard it. Now, so as someone is developing, as a young person is developing from birth, something happens in the brain. A lot of what we call neural networks are established. They're like electric wires, right? As the person is being exposed to the world, is seeing a lot of things, learning a lot of skills. It's like electric wires begin to create all over the place and join. And if you look at the picture in the middle, you know, at birth, you can see the connections are very few. The only thing the child has had is the heartbeat of the mother, maybe some sounds from outside. So really, there are very few connections. But when the child is born, by the time it is 6 years, we almost have reached the peak of neural network development. There are lots of electric cables in there. The nerves, by the way, are like electric cables. A lot have been formed, and there is so much. And if you look at a child around the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, they can be irrational. They are taking risks, they are crying, they are fighting, they are playing, they are really doing so many things. They are willing to learn new games, they are really willing to learn how to swim, to do all sorts of things. It's because the brain is developing, it's learning so much. It's a stage when people learn a lot. And when children, for instance, in that age group, learn a new language, they will learn the language with the accent, the correct accent of that language. While if someone like me decided to learn, for instance, French now, if I spoke French, it would have a lot of my actually accent within it, because my brain has finished developing these neural networks. Now you look at the brain of a child that is 14 years old. What do you notice? Can someone tell us what you notice? What's happened? Vivian, what do you notice? Look at the picture of the nerve connections in the brain of a 14-year-old and compare it to that of a 6-year-old. What do you see? Any volunteer? Tracy? Tracy, do you notice anything different?
It's well structured and it's more clear.
Okay. Okay, I like the way Chrissy has put it. It's more structured and it's more clear. And that's exactly what begins to happen from the age of 11, a process that is called pruning. And those who are familiar with gardening, when you have a plant that is growing, we prune, we cut off some of the branches that are tiny, the small branches that we think have no potential. They are tiny, they have no potential, and they're just crowding out those branches that are more important. So we prune those off. And so that's exactly what happens in your brain. From the age of 11 to your mid to late 20s, your brain, there's a set of cells that begin to prune the excess nerves in your brain. And you may ask me, how does this cell decide what it should prune and what it shouldn't prune? These cells are sent with instructions: prune all the connections that are not being used frequently. And so these cells are going to go in there, and whatever connections are not being used frequently, they're going to prune. They'll just cut them off and chop them off, whether they are actually important or not. Their instruction is, if it's not being used frequently, just chop it off. And so by the time you reach your mid to late 20s, the permanent connections have been established. They've removed all that is considered excess. What you're not using is lost. In other words, use it or lose it. And then after that happens, there's a process that we call myelination. So for those who may have forgotten their biology, so this process is like insulating electric cables. So when you look at the electric cables around your home or even in your house, they are all insulated. They have an insulator. So apart from the fact that it protects you from electric shock, it's also important it helps to increase the efficiency of the cable. So it is properly insulated, electricity is not lost all over the place, and electricity moves from point A to point B without a lot of disturbance. So that is exactly what happens in the brain. You may be asking me, how relevant is this to what we're discussing, but I'm going to show you as we go along. Now, this is a short video, and I want you to listen very carefully. It really reiterates what I've been saying. So make sure your microphones are on. Okay, great. So I hope that that shows us, it shows you that I'm not making up these things. So it is scientifically proven that the synapses, the connections you do not use, are going to be pruned by the time you're in your mid to late young adulthood. So many of us have heard of the African proverb that says it's hard to become left-handed in your old age. So what happens is, if you do not use certain aspects of your brain, certain connections within your brain, they are pruned, like I've already said. And this pruning is going to lead to a number of inabilities or the development of bad habits, depending on what you have emphasized. So there are many people who grow up and they don't know how to swim, they don't know how to, they don't know how to ride a bicycle, they cannot play a game like chess, they can't play an instrument. So because we did not exercise that part of that, we did not exercise our brains when we were at the stage of pruning, our brains cut off those synapses, right? So those synapses have been cut, and that is why we can't do those things now. And then we also say, whoever is annotating, let me first hold on, please. I need to stop the annotation. Just a minute. Okay. So now some people say, you know, it is hard to learn how to ride a bicycle or to swim when you are old, an adult, because your brain knows the dangers. The fact is, your brain thinks it's dangerous because at the time you should have been learning these skills, you did not learn them. And so your frontal cortex matured to believe that these skills are dangerous, and that is why you did not learn them. While someone who learned to do these things at a younger age is not afraid of the dangers associated with them. So in other words, because you didn't exercise this part of your brain, you have lost the ability to do these things. The other unfortunate thing is that addictions develop very fast during this stage, you know, adolescence up to your mid to late 20s. Because let's say you start taking alcohol, a lot of alcohol, your brain realizes that this is an important function because anyway, you're using this function. So it makes sure that it does not trim the connections that are related to taking alcohol or drugs. And then it also makes sure that it is protected, insulated, and myelinated. So when you become an adult, this is something that you have trained your brain to do. Can we make sure we are muted, please? Other bad habits like promiscuity, theft, and lying. You've heard people say, oh, so-and-so is a thief. Everyone knows them as a thief. If you look back, you'll find that they actually they mastered this skill when they were in their adolescence and young adulthood. And the brain, because it said this function is very active, it decided to keep this function. And so that is what you become. On a positive note, however, we can also develop positive skills and good habits if we actually utilize our brains during the time of adolescence and early to mid to late young adulthood. Things like language, planning, skills like swimming, you know, playing games, whatever it is. If you really want to master these skills, you need to start during the time when your brain is undergoing development, during the time the prefrontal cortex is undergoing development, because you don't want these neurons to be considered excess and cut off. Those who are familiar with the Bible, there is a proverb that says, train your children in the way of the Lord and they shall never depart from it. This is not coincidental. It is the fact that if you train someone something during the time their brain is developing and maintaining these networks, they are more likely to stick with it. It's more likely to become a lifelong habit. So this is not a coincidental thing. Okay? Once again, if you have questions, please ask. Now, I want you to just take a look at this picture. For a moment, just take a look at this picture. Some of you may be familiar with this gentleman, Nick. His last name is Vuchisik. Nick is an amazing person. So first of all, he was born without any hands and without any legs, as you can see in that picture. this gentleman could have very easily settled down to be a disabled person, to be called a disabled person. And his parents would have even understood, because I mean, you have no hands and you have no legs. So everyone would excuse you for not being able to do much. But as you can see, this gentleman, he is a public speaker. He's spoken to nations, thousands, millions of people all over the world. He is able to surfboard. If you ask me if I've ever even tried surfboarding, you'll be surprised at my answer. He plays golf, he swims, he does skydiving, and he has a family with 4 children. Everything that the normal, quote unquote, normal human being would say is impossible, he's been able to do. And if you read his story, you'll find out that he did not start doing all these things in his 30s. He started doing these things as a young person, exploring, trying out his skill. What are the things I can do? What are the things that I cannot do? And as a result, his brain was able to say, you know, these connections are important. The swimming connection is important. The golfing, the public speaking, or, you know, the relationship component is important. And they were preserved and well myelinated. And so this is what he has become as a result. So our hope for you in Care 360, we believe that each one of us can do this and even more, especially if you start as a young person, a teenager, as an adolescent. You can do this and even more if you start now. Okay, so this graph, who can tell us what they're seeing in this graph? What does this graph tell you? Should I pick at random? Unmute yourself and tell us what you see. Paula, what do you understand by this graph? Paula?
From the graph, I can tell that from when you're at a younger age, your brain has a higher ability to change. And as you grow, as you age, the amount of effort to enable your brain to change the way it thinks, it diminishes.
Absolutely.
Whereas the amount of effort you need to change the way you think will increase at an older age. And the ability to change will also diminish as you age.
Excellent. Excellent. So that is absolutely the correct answer. So this graph summarizes what we've been talking about up to this time point. When you're younger, from really childhood up to the age of mid-20s to your late 20s, your ability to learn, the ability of your brain to change in response to your experiences. For instance, you're trying to learn a language, you're trying to play a game, you're trying to learn how to be a good planner. The ability of your brain to pick up on those skills is really, really rapid. And yet you need very little effort to let your brain do this. The amount of time you're going to spend practicing the piano, to actually learn to play a piano, is very small, right? But you'll be able to grow by leaps and bounds. On the other hand, after your mid to late 20s, you can still learn these skills, but as you can see by the green line going downwards, the ability of your brain to actually learn these skills is really tiny and it keeps going down. And yet the amount of effort you put in is much, much more. So for instance, I'm learning to play chess right now and I'm in my early 40s. The amount of energy, effort I need to use to learn how to play chess, do you see how high it is? And yet my brain is going to respond in a very sluggish manner. But my children who are still under the ages of 13 are learning the same game, learning very fast, and yet they're putting in much less effort than I'm putting in. So what we're trying to do in Care 360, and that's why we have this Mentoring Young Minds program, is to maximize that period when your brain is still willing to change in spite of the amount of effort that you put in. Remember, it doesn't say put in zero effort. You need to put in effort, but you're still at a time when your brain is elastic and it's willing to change and willing to reserve these components of a good skill. Say someone whose microphone is on, please mute if you're not saying something. If you have any questions, please put up your hand and we'll get you to ask the question or any contribution. So the other question I get asked, I've been asked this many times, why are we focusing on a program called Strategic Planning for Life? People say, you know, the age group that you're targeting, first of all, are young. They don't understand what strategic planning is. Most of them have not learned this in school, or even those that are working already, are still so junior that they would not be involved by the organization in strategic planning. So why am I wasting time? Why is Care 360 wasting time focusing on people who should not be doing strategic planning? And my response is always the same. First of all, each of us, each human being is actually a fully fledged company. And as we go along in this series, we are going to see how each of us is a company. You have departments in your life, right? You have a department of health, thinking about how healthy your body is. What am I going to put in my body, put out? How am I going to exercise? You have a department of relationships, family relationships, relationships with friends, relationships with your teachers, your bosses. You have other departments. You are a sister, you are a choir member, there's so much that you are, you know. You are a student, so we all have several departments in our lives. You are actually a finance company as well, you're a bank. We're going to look at this, but each individual is a fully fledged company. And companies that thrive, the companies that have done well, look at Coca-Cola, look at MTN, look at whatever, they thrive because they have a strategic plan. Strategy means you have a plan for the distant future. They have that plan, and everything that they do is focused on that. So they will say yes to opportunities that are focused, are aligned with their strategic plan, with their goals, and they will say no to every opportunity that is not aligned to their goals. And so we believe that as an individual to thrive, we need to have a strategic plan. The second one is that by starting to do planning, intense planning, like you're going to see at this age, is actually going to tell your brain while you're still young that these are the networks that are important because they are being used frequently. And as a result, as your brain is pruning, it's going to save those connections. It's not going to prune those connections and will ensure that they are well myelinated, well insulated, and they'll survive. And these are skills that you'll be able to use in future for yourself. And then finally, I tell people that this is a hands-on training for actual strategic planning. Everyone who goes through this program with us, at the end of the day, is actually able to legitimately contribute to strategic planning, even at company level. So when you've done this program from beginning to end, the intense program, you can actually add your CV that you're able to do strategic planning. You have experience with strategic planning. Okay, and if there are no questions, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So the first thing, and I'm going to send this to you, I'm going to give you this assignment, is self-audit. When any company is doing strategic planning, the first thing that they do is called a self-audit. Who can tell us what they understand by the term audit? We have two people who are here specifically for self-audit. What do they understand by it? Was it Pamela and Tracy?
Yes, it's an examination. It's an examination of yourself.
Okay, Pam says it's a self-examination. Tracy, were you the other person who is here for self-audit? What do you understand by self-audit?
I'll go with what Pamela said. An examination of yourself.
Okay, self-examination. Okay, you're actually both right. So before we go on, I want you to write in the chat function or to write in your journal now. What are you studying to become? Those who are in school, what are you studying to become? You may be in school at undergraduate level, secondary school, or you've gone back to school for your master's or PhD. What is it that you're trying to become? Can we have some people write in the chat so that we can see? Or write in the chat, or you can undo and let us know. Unmute yourself and be bold and tell us.
May I say something?
Who is speaking?
Lisa.
Yes, Lisa?
I'm studying to become a constructional engineer.
Okay, there's someone studying to become a construction engineer. Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else? What are you trying to become? Someone says, Paula says she's studying to become an electrical engineer. Pamela says she's working to be, studying to become a better version of herself. Okay, anyone else? Moshe says he's trying to become a pilot. He's studying to become a pilot. Excellent. So those are some basic self-audit questions. And when a company is doing strategic planning, the first thing that they do is self-audit. And in self-audit, the company is deciding, where am I? You know, you're doing an honest appraisal. The word honest is very important. Honest or unbiased, 360-degree appraisal. You're looking at yourself at 360 degrees. What are we doing wrong and what are we doing right? So you have to look at the things that the company looks at the things they're doing right and the things they're doing wrong. Do we have any goals? Have we been true to our mission and vision? Did we do things as we had planned to do? Because you set up a plan and did you actually follow it? Are there some areas where we did better than in others? Why did we do better in some areas than in other areas? Were we responsible for the resources we had? With the resources we had, you had excellent members of staff, you had a lot of money, you had a good market. Were you responsible with the resources? Then did you take advantage of all resources that were available? And then did we take into account every department and every unit within our organization? And one thing is that when you're doing a self-audit, we expect the same of you. If you're going to do a proper self-audit, you need to sit down and be very honest with yourself and look at every aspect of your life. At this present time, what are the things that I'm doing right? What are the things that I'm doing wrong? Do I have a mission? Do I have a vision? Have I been true to that mission and vision? Have I done things like I planned to do, or have I been doing things all over the place? If your plan was to, if your plan was to learn how to play an instrument, or your plan was to get an A, a grade A, did you get those grades? Did you study as you said you would study? So it's you're really looking at yourself in honesty. Did I use the resources available to me, the textbooks that I have, the internet? Did I use it to meet the goals that I had set out for myself? Did I care for every aspect of my life, my relationships, my work, my personal development? Did I put all those into consideration? I'm going to, at the end of this, after this meeting, I'm going to send an email to everyone who has attended this meeting with the questions that you need to answer this week as you do your self-audit. The second aspect in the self-audit is goal setting. Companies always set long-term goals. Without a long-term goal, a company, without a long-term goal, a company cannot survive. You need to look in the long term, in the distant future. What do we want to become in that distant future? And as an individual, you need to ask yourself this question as well. Don't live at random. You know, many of us actually live our lives at random. Just because you wake up in the morning and you're breathing, you live another day. Do you actually have goals for your life? Now, I want to ask you to take a time, this time, I'm going to give you a minute. So write in your journals. I hope you have your journals. What would you be in 10 or 15 years' time if failure was not an option? In other words, if you were guaranteed today that whatever you want to be in 10 or 15 years' time, you are going to be. You'll have all the resources you need. No one is going to say no to you, whatever it is. What is it that you want that you would be in 10 to 15 years' time if failure was not an option? I'm going to give you a minute to write this down. Think about it, please write it down. I'm waiting, we're almost done. Okay, I believe that we are done with 1 minute. Does anyone want to share with us their answer? Any bold person? Moshe. In 10 to 15 years' time, if failure was not an option, what would you be?
I would be a very, very successful man.
What does successful mean?
I would be earning money. I would have a business.
Okay.
A
What
profitable
business? What business would that be?
Like a hotel or
Okay.
or a hardware.
Okay, a hotel or a hardware shop. Okay. Anyone else? Moshe, I'm going to come back to that. Thank you for sharing your dream with us. Anyone else willing to share with us their Vivian? Vivian, I'm going 10 to 15 years time from now.
Miriam.
Yes,
Yes,
Vivian.
Miriam.
Yes, tell us. 10 to 15
Yes.
years from now. What would you be?
In 10 to 15 years time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I'm studying to be an accountant. So by 10 to 15 years time, I would want to finish. In 10 to 15 years time, I want to see myself already as a senior accountant, and I would have finished already my CPA.
Okay, she wants to finish her CPA by then. So because of time, I want to ask more people. I'm just going to see if you listen to the discourse I had with Moshe when he told me what he wanted to be. He said he wants to be a successful person. And I asked him, what is your definition of success? He said he wants to earn a lot of money. And the question was, how are you going to earn that money? So when you're planning for when you're establishing a goal, it has to be something that is actual, something that is, I want to say, tangible. Because earning money, for instance, you can earn money in so many different ways, right? Earn money in multiple different ways. So you have to ask yourself, what is it exactly that I want to be doing to earn that money that I want to earn? And that's what you need to zero into. No company sets its goal as earning $1 million. That is not the goal they set. They talk about what they're going to do that is going to earn them that $1 million if their interest is money. So you need to be very specific about the things you actually want to do. So in the more detailed program, the full-time program, we actually go through this and help people develop them. But I want you to give this, this as your assignment. Now, the next question I want to ask you that I want you to also write down is, what have you done over the last 2 weeks to contribute towards that life goal that you have? That thing you want to be 10 years from now or 15 years from now. In the last 2 weeks, last week and the week ending today, ending today, what have you done to contribute towards that goal? If you want to be a musician, if you want to be an athlete, if you want to be an actor, if you want to be an accountant, whatever it is that you desire deeply in your heart to be, what have you done towards that goal in the last 2 weeks? Please write it down. Okay, I'm assuming that you have done some writing, either you've written something or you haven't written anything. Does anyone want to share what they've written with us? Vivian, since you're unmuted, should I? Yes, Vivian?
Oh, what I did last week and this week that ended that contribute to my career as an accountant. I mostly balance. I do budgeting at home, and I balance books. I make
Unfortunately, your connection is breaking, Vivian.
At home, I make shopping. I buy things for home, and I at the end of the day, I see what I've used, how much I've used.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's excellent,
Hello?
Vivian. Yes, we hear you. We hear you, Vivian.
Yes.
And we've had your response.
Yeah, I was saying in the last.
We've had your response,
Okay.
Vivian. Yeah.
Okay, but my network was poor.
Oh, that's okay. But we've had your response. And what I want you to notice is she's doing something to contribute to her becoming an accountant, which is very important. But I also want you to, because for instance, Vivian said she wants to be a senior accountant. That is her 10-year, 15-year goal. You need to also start now doing something that is going to contribute towards becoming a senior accountant. So not only do you want to be an accountant, but you also want to be a senior accountant. What are you doing now to contribute towards becoming not only an accountant, but a senior accountant? So as we make our goals and make our plans, I want you all to keep that in mind. Think about your goal 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And then as you create your plan, think about what you're going to do, every aspect that you can do to become that thing that you want to be. The example already, a senior accountant has to be working on becoming an accountant, but needs to be doing something to develop her skills as a senior manager. So I hope that makes sense. So we'll go on to the next. I don't see anyone else volunteering to give us what they've said, but we'll go on to the next slide. So the next slide is talks about inertia, and inertia is one of the dream killers. In the coming session, we'll talk about dream killers, but one of the biggest dream killers is what I call inertia. Inertia is, like Isaac Newton put it, those who remember physics, Isaac Newton's law of inertia states that objects that are in motion tend to stay in motion, while those objects that are at rest tend to stay at rest. So remember our concept in the beginning, the brain pruning things that are important, pruning things that are not important, and keeping only that is important. So when you are in a state of rest, you are doing nothing. Naturally, you're going to stay doing nothing, except if you take an effort to actually do something. So in other words, things stay the way they are and nothing wants to happen on its own. For you to change where you are, to actually reach towards your goal, you need to do something. I've had a lot of people complaining, saying, you know, my parents are making me do sciences. I'm not interested in sciences. I actually want to be a dancer. I want to be a musician in future. And my question to them is, what are you doing now that is contributing towards that thing that you want to be, to that musician that you want to be? You don't need to be DJing in clubs, but are you reading about music? Are you learning music on your own? You don't have to be going to a music school to learn music, for instance. The music teacher in my children's school self-taught himself how to play the different instruments because he wanted to do music. So he worked hard in other aspects in school, but also focused on what his passion was and self-taught himself. So you need to be able to, you should not be giving excuses. Giving excuses are going to maintain you in a state of inertia. The other thing is that, so that is another reason why it's important for us to know what it is that we want to do, what we want to be, and to begin doing it now, doing something about it right now. Just think about it. We start learning concepts, being taught concepts from nursery school. And these are concepts that we are going to use in primary, in secondary, in the university. So in other words, we start preparing for our university exam in nursery school. So then why do we think that we can magically wake up and be whatever we want to be and have skills that we want to have without even practicing for them? So it is important that if you have written down your goals, begin to have a plan of how you are going to achieve those goals and actually begin doing something about it. So I want to give you homework, and like I said, I'm going to email this to you, but you can copy it if you want. In the next 1 week, as we prepare for the next Saturday session, these are the things I want you to ask yourself and write them down. What would I be in 15 years' time if failure was not an option? So those are going to be your strategic goals. In other words, if everything happens, everything falls in line for me, I get the resources, everything, what would I be in 15 years' time? What do I want to be? Those are actually your strategic goals. Then the next thing I want each of you to do is to, the next thing I want you to do is to create a plan in 5 years. A plan that, a goal in 5 years that is connected to this 15-year goal. So what is my goal in 15 years? What do I want to be doing in 15 years, in 5 years' time? 5 years from today, what do I want to have achieved towards my 15-year goal? I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please put up your hand and ask a question, or unmute yourself and ask a question. And then after I have created my goals for the next 5 years, and in the next 5 years, what I want to have achieved, I need each of us to start working, creating actions that we are going to do in each of these years until the 5th year. So what are we going to do in the next 5 years, starting today, to contribute to our goal in 5 years, to a 5-year goal. And then also, I want you to start creating more finite actions of activities you're going to start doing this week towards achieving your 5-year goal. Are there any questions at this point? Because this is the homework. Any questions at this point? So first of all, your lifelong goal, your long-term goal, 10 years, 15 years from now, if failure was not an option, what do I want to be? And then in 5 years from now, what do I want to have achieved in contribution to those lifelong goals? And then what actions am I going to take in the next 5 years to make sure that I achieve my 5-year goals? And then starting this week, what are the activities I'm going to do? Are you getting it? What are the activities I'm going to do that are part of the plan that I have for the next 5 years? I want you to write that down, spend some time this week and write those down. Is there a question? If not, I'm going to continue. We're almost done. And then I insist in Care 360, we insist that you have to write these things down in a journal, not just on rough pieces of paper. It needs to be in one place, a place where you can keep revisiting it, but also a place where your brain can be comfortable that you actually are doing something. In the next slide, I'm going to show you why we insist that you need to write and why scientifically it is important that you have to write. There's a scientific phenomenon that is called the open loop phenomenon. I know most of us have had this feeling of, you prepare for an exam, and when you're ready for the exam, you go to the exam room and the exam is cancelled or it is postponed. There is that feeling that you get. You feel really, who can tell us, how do you feel? Akena, Emmanuel, how do you feel? You prepare for an exam, you get to the exam room and they're like, oh, we're sorry, due to unavoidable circumstances, the exam has been postponed. How do you feel?
It's a terrible feeling.
It's a horrible feeling. Yes, Lisa, how do you feel if that happened? Lisa, we can't hear you.
I'd feel sad.
You should feel sad. What about Esther, Queen Esther? How would you feel? If you've gone through that experience, how did you feel about it? Esther, you're muted. Esther? Oh, what? We can't hear you, unfortunately. We're going to move on. So there's that feeling, you feel really upset. You prepared for this exam, it has been cancelled, so the exam is not going to be done. And then what about, I'm sure many of you have had this experience. When you leave an exam room after handing in your script, you tell yourself, if they were to give me that same paper, I would probably fail the exam. You feel like everything that was in your brain has been left on that script, on that piece of paper. And then there's also that feeling, some of you have maybe gone through this or have heard people talk about it. When someone you love passes away and you're unable to attend the funeral, there is that feeling of no closure. People say, I haven't got closure. And all these feelings that we've talked about are actually scientifically legitimate. There was a scientist, a psychiatrist, a mental health doctor. She was also a psychologist. One time she observed, she was a Russian, she observed that in a restaurant, after you've eaten your food and paid your bills, the waiters seem to forget about you. They don't seem to remember you. Initially, she thought that it is simply because there's nothing more they're going to gain from you. You paid for your food and you're done. But when she studied this a bit more, and she found out that all human beings are like that. When we have finished doing something, the brain seems to forget about it. And yet, if something is not yet complete, the brain keeps remembering it. And she described that as the open loop phenomenon. In other words, the brain feels that there is a connection that has not yet been made. There is no closure. And this is actually an activity of the primitive brain. You remember in the beginning, we talked about the almond, the amygdala, which is the primitive brain. It seems to focus on things that it believes are not yet complete. So if you have started something and haven't finished it, your brain is going to keep telling you you haven't finished. You have to work on it, you need to finish it. But if you begin to take actions towards completing this goal, then the brain actually settles down because it believes that you are completing it. So many of us have been woken up at night with thoughts in our mind, things that you want to do, these goals that you have 10 and 15 years from now, they keep buzzing in your mind. And the simple reason is because we have not, first of all, written them down. In other words, got them out of our minds and shown our brain that we're actually conscious of it and we're doing something about it. And also, we have not started doing anything about it. So that is why we insist that you need to write it down. You've noticed how your brain, as human beings, we are afraid of forgetting things. If, for instance, you're going somewhere, you're going somewhere and you need to carry something along with you, something you don't normally take, right? And you don't put it in a place that you will not forget, your brain will not settle down. You will keep thinking, I may forget that thing, I may forget that thing. It's because in your brain, actually, there is an open loop. Until you put that item in a place with something that you don't forget, you normally don't forget, your brain is not going to settle down. I'll give an example. If there's something I need to carry, for instance, if I need to carry an umbrella, I don't normally carry umbrellas. But if it's a rainy season and I need to remind myself that it may rain in the evening tomorrow, so I need to carry an umbrella. If I don't put that umbrella in a place, I will not forget. And that place is usually with my glasses. If I place it with my glasses, then my brain settles down because I never forget my glasses. And if I do, I always come back home to pick them up. But if I put that umbrella, for instance, with my phone, my brain will not settle because I have forgotten my phone at home a number of times. And when I forget my phone, I normally don't come back for it. So my brain knows that that loop is not a complete loop unless the umbrella is placed with the glasses. You've also had the experience of waking up in the middle of the night, remembering some really random thing, an assignment you haven't completed at work or in school. It's simply because your amygdala doesn't care whether it is daytime or nighttime. It's not like the frontal cortex. It's going to wake you up until that loop is closed. Some people have nightmares. You know, you have a trip the next day, you know you're supposed to leave early, and you have nightmares about missing the trip. It's simply because your brain is actually, it's simply because your brain is telling you that, you know, it's possible that you're going to miss that trip. That loop is not closed. Someone has given us the example, someone has sent the chat, the example of your mask. If you're going to go somewhere these days, your brain is going to harass you about your mask. You may wake up at night even trying to remember where you left your mask. So that is how the brain works, that open and closed loop phenomenon. So that is another reason why we insist that you have to write. And finally, we insist that you have to write because if you don't write these things down, then your amygdala keeps firing. That is what becomes important in the brain. And so you are not allowing your prefrontal cortex to perform the roles that it's supposed to play, the roles of planning, the roles of thinking about consequences, organizing. So as long as your brain is full of these things, as long as your brain is full of these things, those open loops, your frontal cortex is not going to perform as it should perform. And therefore, you're going to end up losing connections that are really important. Okay. So this is our second last or third last slide. So I've given you homework, I've given you assignments, and I'm expecting that this work is going to be done if you're going to benefit from this program. The first habit that I want us to develop, and especially for those who are still in their adolescence and those who are in their 20s up to their mid to late 20s. One is I want you to create a habit. And if you create a habit at this stage, like we saw in the other graph, you're not going to need so much effort to create that habit, and yet it's going to stick for a lifetime. I want to encourage you to find a place in your home, preferably a place in your home, where you can sit at least for 15 minutes every single day. 15 minutes. I prefer the mornings, but you can choose a time that works best for you. But a place, preferably the same place in your house, where you can sit for at least 15 minutes uninterrupted every single day. And you're going to be using this spot to develop yourself. This week, we're going to do self-auditing, this and next week. You're going to audit yourself in this place. What I have here, the 6 steps, is what I do personally, and it has worked for me. You're welcome to take it on or to create your own method. But what I want you to do is 15 minutes minimum every day, sit in this same place with your journal, and you're going to write. So what I do personally is when I go to my place in the mornings, I start with a prayer, and usually I pray for my mind to be open so that I can focus, but I also pray that I should be open to direction. what I've experienced when you're having this personal time is that you're going to hear things sometimes that you don't agree with. But these are things that are realities. You may not agree with them, but you need to be open to listening to everything that is there. So after I've prayed for my mind to be focused, for me to stop thinking about other things, I pray for my mind to be open to directions. And then after that, I sit down and I begin to listen to what is happening in my mind. Our minds are very busy places. There's always some kind of buzz that is going on. And this is mainly because of the open loop phenomenon. We have so many open loops in there. That thing you want to be 10 years from now, the senior management position you want, it's actually an open loop in your mind. So I normally sit quietly and I start listening to my mind. I listen to the loudest voice. Normally there are many voices, but I listen to the one that is coming out the most. And I write down what I'm hearing. What is it that I'm hearing? What loop is it that is not complete? And I listen from where it starts up to the very end until I've exhausted that thought completely. Now, when I'm done with that, I write an action plan. Okay, so this is the loop that is open in my mind. This is what I want to be. I want to be a senior accountant 10 years from now, but it's on my mind, so I've written it down. And then I come up with an action plan. What am I going to do to contribute towards that thing that is keeping my mind active, that open loop that is on my mind? So when I'm done with that loudest voice, and normally what I've experienced is, after I have written this down, that voice actually ceases, there's silence, and the next item begins to be loud. And so I listen to everything in my mind until I have emptied my mind and follow the same steps. Listen, write down what it's saying, and write down the resolutions and the action plans towards achieving the resolution. After I've done that, I normally commit the plans to God, because I believe scripture says, for those who are Christians, it says many are the plans of human beings, but it's the purpose of God that finally prevails. So I commit my plans to God, and then I get out of that room and I use the plans I created as my to-do list for that day. So what I'm asking you to do starting from this week is to commit the time. Find that place where you can be uninterrupted and spend at least 15 minutes in there, listening to your mind, writing down what comes out from your mind, and planning for that thing you want to be 10 years from now. Finally, I'm going to address our biggest distraction in this age, and that is the mobile phone. The mobile phone is the biggest distraction. For most of us, the phone has grown roots into our hands, into our hearts, into our bodies. The phone is controlling the things that we do. The phone is distracting us from spending time doing things that we need to be doing towards our goal. What I'm going to ask you to do this week, each of us to do this week, is to download an app. This app is called the Stay Focused app. I'm not getting anything, they're not paying me for advertising them, but it has worked for me. So I'm going to ask each one of us to download this app. It is a free app. Go onto your, to whatever operating system you use, Android or iOS, and download this app. It's called the Stay Focused app. And this app, I like this app because it shows me how I have my phone habits for the whole, every day, every minute of the day, every week, every month, right? So for instance, if you look at these two, it's showing you the usage overview for today, usage statistics, how much time was spent on Facebook, how much time was spent on the phone, how much time was spent on Chrome. And then on the second one where you see the arrow, it's showing how much time was spent browsing, how much time, in 24 hours, by the way, how much time was spent on Facebook, on 3List, on Zoom, on google.com, whatever it is. So this app is really good because it's going to keep track of how you use your phone. It's going to enlighten you, show you how much you're using your phone. Before I downloaded this app, I was like, I don't think I use my phone that much. It's not distracting me much. But after I looked at my habits in a week, I made a lot of changes as a result of that. And going forward next week, we are going to look at some things you can do with this app, how you can control your usage simply using this app, and eventually develop a habit going along. So I'm also going to send you this, this table, and each individual, please, in this week on a daily basis. So someone has asked, does it take a lot of storage space? Absolutely not. But even if it did, this is essential. I want you to delete your Instagram page, whatever page it is that is not essential, and please focus on this because it is a life skill. Let's not think about how much space it takes up, but focus on the benefits you're going to get from it, okay? So I'm going to send each of you this week also this table, and you're going to use that app to track your cell phone usage. Some people are going to say, why don't I simply just follow it up on the phone? I want you to write it in, you know, studies have shown that when we actually write, our brains maintain information longer. Research was done comparing students who just sat in a classroom and typed their notes compared to those who actually wrote by hand. And those who wrote by hand were more likely to remember what they had learned and to do better. So this week, using this app, after every 24 hours, you're going to fill in this table. The top of it's called the personal cell phone tracker. And so we're going to start this month. It's excellent that today is August the 1st. So the first column is the day and date. Why is the day important? Because writing the day is important because you'll notice that your cell phone habits change depending on the day of the week. I was laughing with someone one time and said in Uganda, apps like Facebook and WhatsApp are very busy during work days. But on public holidays and weekends when people are doing their own personal things, the usage goes down. In other words, we are stealing time from school and from our workplaces. So you need to write the day of the week, like today is Saturday, and it's the 1st of August. And then you look at you're going to look at what the app tells you that today, at the end of today, how much time did you spend on your phone in total? So I've given an example, 2 hours and 30 minutes. And then we want to track the top most used apps individually. So let's say you find that WhatsApp is the app you use the most, and this app is going to show you actually the time. So WhatsApp was the one I used the most, for instance. You spent 50 minutes. Then you may find out that you spent 20 minutes on Facebook as the second most used app, and the third most used was Instagram, where you spent 10 minutes. Tomorrow, do the same. Maybe Sunday, you spent 5 hours, and what are your top most used apps on Sunday? So you're going to do this every day of this week. And when we meet next week, I'd like to hear from some of you. Some people may, from my experience, some people are shy to tell us what they spend most of their time on. But the fact is that if you have written it down, you'll be able to learn from it personally. So I'm going to send this, and I ask you that at the end of every day, please spend some time and track how much you used your phone. During this week, please do not change your phone habits. Use your phone exactly as you normally use your phone, as you have been using it last week and the week before, because we want to get what we call a baseline. If your baseline is false, you forge the baseline, then you won't be able to know whether you're actually changing or not. So please be faithful. Use your phone like you normally do. If you're on Instagram all the time, please make sure at the end of the day, you record how much time you spent on Instagram. Don't change your behaviors this week simply because we are doing this personal assessment this week. So this is the end of the presentation today. We've gone a little bit beyond the 1 hour because we actually started a few minutes late. We're waiting for people to join in. But I'm really hoping you're going to do your assignment so that when we meet next week, we can continue from where we have stopped. We are going to go more into goal setting, the details of goal setting, and we're going to look at the things that are preventing us from actually achieving our goals. Do we have any questions or any additions? Anyone wants to say something? No questions? Now, everybody who has been part of this, I hope you registered in advance, because if you did, then we have your email address. If you did not, kindly put your email address in the chat function. You can see the chat function over there. Put in your email address so that we can be able to get in touch with you. So if you have friends who you think may benefit from this session, please inform them. After next week, we are not taking on new people for this course, because when you've missed two lessons, then you're too late to join the course. But anyone else who is interested in joining